Welcome to the Australian Property Investment Podcast with your host, Aaron Christie David. Each episode, we ask an expert to share their key insights for aspiring investors to make confident property choices.
G'day everyone, my name is Aaron Christie David. I'm your host of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. Each episode, we like to bring in what I call best in breed, someone in their industry that's highly knowledgeable, highly respected. And today we are blessed to have the company of Peter Raptis. G'day, Peter.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Mate, I'm fantastic. Quick background on your story, Peter. You're the director of now Acumentis Value Group. And mate, we've had the pleasure of meeting through our industry events.
Yep.
Heard you speak a while ago. I'm like, this guy knows a lot about a lot. And you'll probably blush when I say that. But having a chat to you just seems to roll off the tongue. And that's what I really want to kind of get you in the studio today. Get your thoughts, particularly in your area of expertise, which is prestige properties and the market and valuations and how that kind of rolls into the broader property market. But before we kick off, mate, do you want to kind of give us a brief intro? I call it the 3 Ps, personal, professional and property story as well on yourself as a human, Peter.
Okay. Well, I've been happily married for over 30 years. I got 2 grown-up kids, which has given us a lot of freedom now because I don't have to worry about them anymore. They're out there doing their own thing. So we were looking forward to doing a bit more travelling now that there was the 2 of us. But, that all kind of got ruined with COVID. But,
so if you had to go somewhere, where's your next holiday trip, do you think?
Well, we like going to the Greek islands and we've actually got a house there and, we were going to go there last year for 10 weeks. It was all booked.
Yep.
And so we'll see. Maybe next year.
10 weeks might turn into quite some time if you actually got stuck over there.
Well, exactly right. So from a professional point of view, I guess I've been a valuer for nearly 35 years.
Wow.
And I've always had a parallel career where I've also done a lot of lecturing at, say, university and the TAFE colleges in the property courses. And, I stumbled into that by accident, just like I did with valuation. And I've been doing that for, I think this year, this is my 31st, or it might be my 32nd year of part-time teaching.
Yeah.
So it's worked well because I figure you can't stand up in front of a group of students and not know what you're talking about. So it keeps me on my toes. But I think the students enjoy that I can bring real-world experiences into the classroom. So,
and you don't do something like both, I guess, your role as a valuer and as an educator without loving both sides of the equation, right?
Look, I do both because I really enjoy them. We sold our business that we had for 21 years about 4 years ago to one of our competitors.
Yeah.
And
so that was under the brand of MVS.
Yeah, we were MVS valuers. And I could have just gone and retired after that, but I just enjoyed what I did so much. And I've got this clientele that I like to look after and I love doing stuff like what we're doing today.
Yeah.
So I've continued doing that because I'm passionate about it, and it's the same thing with teaching. I jokingly say I do it for free, but I don't want the universities to hear that because they'll go, "Oh, Pete will do it for free." So that's a little bit about me and what I do. But yeah, I got an evaluation by accident, but I've just been so passionate about it. I just love it. I wouldn't do anything else. I've never had a moment where I've thought, I just got to do something else for a living. I hate this. It has its ups and downs, but I just love it. My biggest problem is at some point I need to say enough's enough and retire and stop at some point in the future. But because I enjoy it so much, I don't want to be the bloke that's 85 and still working.
It's not work if you enjoy it, is what it's saying,
true,
isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think the industry's kind of blessed to have you as part of that, and it's almost that type of knowledge and IP leaving an industry kind of leaves a gap. So as much as you can kind of pass that on and pay it forward, I think it's going to be the industry better for it as well.
You know what? I do it daily with the staff. I think of something or I read a valuer's report or something that I've got to sign off on. And I then ring them up. I can't help myself. I ring them up and say, listen, I want to run something past you here. You wrote this in the report. Let me explain to you what that is, because it's easy for me just to correct it and leave it. But I actually really want them to understand it better.
Lovely.
Yeah. So that's the teacher in me coming out. I can't help myself.
I think that sets up people who have great long careers as well, because they're not suddenly getting kind of wrapped over the knuckles if they're putting something in there, or they're getting coached and mentored and trained to raise the standard?
I think it becomes easier. Once you truly understand what you're doing and you go, I get how it all works, your confidence goes through the roof, and so does your enjoyment. Your enjoyment improves, and also you're better able to manage things like risk associated with what we do. Yeah.
Mate, valuations is one part of, I guess, the client buying journey or the experience that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it kind of feels like this is something that makes or breaks a purchase, right? Someone buys a property or an investment property, has to get valued, and the client has no interaction with the valuer, the buyer.
Yeah.
And so the bank sends the value out to the property, and we're just everyone's sweating on the valuation result or the report and what comes out into that as well. So in your experience, kind of taking away some fear about what happens from a valuation perspective and some of the I guess the issues that may come up, what has been some of those that you've seen in your experience that you go, hey, this is something that's to be concerned about, whereas is the valuation kind of that mere formality? I guess the big question behind there is someone's ideally paying for a property, but the valuation comes in less than what they're paid for. Is everyone's biggest fear.
I would break it down to three things, and they're the same three things I convey to valuers. And I say what our clients need to know is the value right? Is it in the ballpark?
Yeah.
And realistically, this has been said a million times, it's not an exact science. Let's get it in the ballpark. If we get it in the ballpark, everyone's happy. You could get 10 valuers look at the one property, and they're all going to come up with 10 prices.
Yes.
But they're all going to be in that, 8 out of 10 will be in that ballpark of what we would call market value. 1 or 2 may get it wrong either way.
Okay.
But the majority will be in the ballpark. But the idea that all 10 of them are going to come up with the same price, it's never going to happen. It's more likely to be a fluke. So let's get the price right. The other two issues are simple. Is there an issue with the property itself? Like from a physical point of view, like is the building falling apart?
Right.
Is there something wrong with the swimming pool's not working, like the concrete shell is cracked and it's leaking? Is there something wrong with the location? It's on a busy road with 6 lanes of traffic. It's backing onto the nuclear reactor.
Yeah.
And so that's the second thing. Is there something wrong with the property? The final thing is there an issue in the market that we need to tell people about? So it might be a case that this property might have reduced marketability for whatever reason. It's not really all that popular in the marketplace. There's some properties across Sydney, for example, that are only accessible by boat.
Yeah, okay.
You go to somewhere like Scotland Island.
I was about to say Scotland Island.
Now, I've been on there plenty of times and done lots of valuations, and I love it there.
Yeah.
But a lot of people would say, I can't live like that. You know what, I've got to catch a boat across to the mainland and, what if I've forgotten the milk? And so it's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
So those properties would have a reduced marketability where it might take longer to sell.
Yeah.
So I look at it, the price. So as a valuer, we go, is the price okay?
Yeah.
So from a valuation point of view, there's 2 types of vals really. There's the one we do for a purchase and a refinance. The purchase is, well, has it been tested out there in the marketplace? Well, it's been put to auction. It's been on the market for a month or 2, local agent. I'd say most valuers are going to adopt those purchase prices.
Yeah.
It's very unusual that they don't.
Yep.
Sometimes you get some crazy auction result that no one can understand, not even the real estate agent, not even the vendor. They all go, I don't get it. But generally speaking, most valuers won't split hairs. They'll go, well, it's been tested in the marketplace. There's some sales that support it, and they run with it. Then you've got the refinance.
Yeah.
Well, now the refinance is really about everyone's opinion because the owner will have an opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, they will spent money on the property and they've done some work on it, therefore the value.
So I think as a good valuer should have a discussion with the owner, and, my view is I collect as much information as I can from wherever. And part of it is, I'll talk to the owner and say, have you got your own opinion of value and why do you think that? Because they may well say, look, the house next door just sold. and it's very similar to my property. So that will then cause me as a valuer to go and investigate the sale next door if I wasn't aware of it. And then sometimes owners will just say, oh, look, I don't know, I had a real estate agent here 5 years ago or somebody up the road, I think they sold something for whatever price. And it could be based upon kind of nothing. So, but at the end of the day, you got to write what you're comfortable with. I guess, Aaron, if it was up to me, if I was the king of the valuation world, I'd like to give a range in value and say, look, we think this property is worth somewhere between this and that.
Yeah.
But that's not what happens because everyone wants a single value because the bank wants to lend 80%, or if there's mortgage insurance, they want to go to 95%. Yeah. So we got to get we get pinned down to a single value. And I know that whatever value you put on a property, you look at it and you go, it could be worth a bit more or might even be worth a bit less, but that's kind of as comfortable or as close as I can get. But I know that can cause a problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's, a fraction underneath, for example, can have quite a ripple effect.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things is that valuers are willing to listen, right? And it's a matter of if you're prepared to provide information in advance to the valuer to say, well, listen, there's been these sales in the street or around the corner, would you be able to consider them, right? No valuer is going to say no. So my view is the more information a valuer has, if there's things you want to highlight about the property, at the end of every inspection, I always ask the owner, is there anything you'd like to point out that maybe is not apparent? For example, they might have underfloor heating in their bathrooms.
Right.
But you can't see it.
Yeah.
Right? So unless they point that out to you, well, so you've got to have that conversation. So that's the opportunity, I guess, for an owner to say, well, we've done this and we've done that and, we've got this and that may have an impact on value as well.
Excellent. No, that's super insightful. I guess in your role, you focus predominantly on, and you have a specialty towards the prestige side of the market, which is what I really want to kind of pick your brain on as well.
Yeah, sure.
That is, we're having chat just before about kind of some of the numbers that we're seeing, particularly in the Sydney market.
Yeah.
Rapid price growth, particularly in the last, say, 2-3 years, and what that's now on sold for as well. So kind of want to go back in your experience and say, what have you seen recently that's kind of even surprised yourself about the rapid price growth? And then after that, I guess we'll go to the question which is on everyone's lips, which is how much steam is left in this property market, how much more to go? And because I think that's where everyone's effectively looking at the market going, how much is left in the price growth?
Yeah, I started my career in the late 80s and we had a property boom back then, and we all remember those movies like Wall Street where greed is good and all that kind of stuff. And we had the people, here in Australia, like, we had the Alan Bonds and the Christopher Scases and so on. And I think the difference from back then to now, when I look at the luxury end of the market, there's a lot more depth in the market now in terms of genuine wealth.
Yeah, okay.
Back then, there was a lot of, I guess, paper wealth. You went to the bank and the banks weren't anywhere as diligent as they are now. Yeah. It was like, oh, well, you're Christopher Scase. We'll just lend you whatever you want, right? And so I've found that now there's this, there's a lot more billionaires than we've had. And billionaires, well, you think about that number. That's a massive number. And so when you got people that are multi-billionaires buying $10, $20, $30 million real estate, in a way, is peanuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think there's a lot more genuine wealth. We've also seen a lot of people make a lot of money out of real estate where they had these terrible properties that sat there idle for a long time. Suddenly they've been rezoned.
Yeah.
And you see what's happened right across Sydney with all the development. They were all on sites that were, those improvements were obsolete, old factory buildings, warehouses and so on. And so somebody that had this terrible old property that they couldn't find a tenant suddenly got rezoned and they could put high-rise on there. And this person who might have had a property worth $3-4 million has suddenly been given $30 or $40 million. Yeah. What we've seen is those people in turn have gone out and bought nice real estate. So I think, as I said, there's a lot more depth to that market now, and there's a lot of money at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I guess when you have the high end of town, and then I guess does it filter down to then the next price rung because people are trying to, I guess, the aspirational parts of the market. And I take that at a very small level where the 1.5 purchases, somewhere 2.5 can come in over them, for example, and the 2.5 purchases, the final purchase.
A lot of it is a domino effect.
Yeah.
So I was talking to one of my colleagues yesterday and he was telling me about how the prices in Sydney, in Malabar, have gone through the roof. Now, Malabar ain't a swish suburb, right? The reason for that has been the domino effect of what's happened in places like Bondi, Tamarama, Bronte, and then it is literally a domino effect to all the other suburbs that suddenly Malabar looks really cheap compared to Maroubra or Coogee and so on, and then those prices go through the roof. So there is that domino effect of, the top end of the market goes through the roof and then it makes everything else look cheap, and then that suddenly catches up and and on it goes. I mean, you just look at some of the prices in the western suburbs of Sydney, what they are now, and people can't believe it. But that's because the rest of Sydney's gone through the roof.
Yeah.
So.
And we talk about the Sydney market, but then you look at interstate, and you've seen Noosa, Sunshine Coast, for example. That's there. Byron's obviously the darling of Australia when it comes to price growth as well. But other parts of Perth, for example, Adelaide, are now nudging $5 million suburbs when predominantly that wasn't their price point at all. So do you feel like it's like a rising tide has lifted all ships, or what's your look when you take a?
So we've seen a huge impact on outside of Sydney. So if you go up and down the coastline, especially if you go north, all these, let's call them, regional areas, prices have gone through the roof there as well.
Yeah.
And part of that's had to do with COVID as well, because people have gone for this sea change, tree change, and said, you know what, I don't actually have to be in Sydney.
Yeah.
I can be living up at Port Macquarie and doing the same thing. I know someone who's moved out of Sydney, got a pretty good job with one of the big banks.
Yeah.
They've been working from home. They've just moved to Canberra.
Yeah, right.
And they're saying, I can still do my job as per before.
Yeah.
We're seeing this influx into these regional areas as well, because traditionally you'd look at those areas and go, gee, that's really cheap. I'll buy a house for $400,000. And all the locals there are complaining in these regional areas saying, oh, these people from Sydney are coming here and snapping up all these properties. And you're right about places like Noosa and other parts of Australia. It's this huge love affair with property now because, you can't put your money in the bank. You get nothing. You can't go and get government bonds, term deposits. So your option is let's buy some shares or let's buy property.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people still getting nervous about the share market. And as you know, it's very hard to borrow against shares compared to property.
Yeah.
So, and I think people have also thought this is it. If we're going to get in a property, we've got to do it now because interest rates are at record lows. Let's get in and buy. So we're seeing this right across the whole country, but it's turned everything on its head because if you think about it, in a pandemic like we've had, we've had a property boom. It's almost, it makes no sense. See,
if anything was going to impact the Australian property market, I say to every client, I'm like, an international pandemic might have been the straw that broke the camel's back.
Well,
it's not. It went the other way.
I'll tell you what, Aaron, it's lucky that it's not my parents' generation that are in kind of my position or kind of in control of, say, spending, right? Because that generation would have responded by saying, don't do anything, don't buy any new cars, don't do anything, right? Just save all your money. My father's no longer with us, but he would have freaked out seeing all this. He would have said, why are you renovating your house? Don't you know what's going on, you know? And so what would have happened in reality is we wouldn't have spent the money that we did over the last 18 months. I'm talking about as a nation. Because how many people went and did renovations?
Oh, I mean, the fact that we've got building supply shortages says enough, doesn't it?
I mean, try buying a brand new car at the moment.
Impossible.
Right?
Yeah.
I had a mate of mine, he placed an order in April.
Yeah.
He's still waiting.
I'm sure.
And I said, mate, just imagine you're going to get it in January. He says, don't tell me that. I said, just imagine that's when it's coming. And if you get it before that, be happy. Whereas before, you'd walk into the car yard and a few weeks later it was delivered to you. Everything's turned on its head. And in a way, I think it's good because, you know, my father did say money makes the world go round. He said if people aren't spending money, but he just didn't want to be the one to spend it. But so it's been interesting to see what's happened because of COVID. And I think that has caused people to reconsider about, do I still really want to live in Sydney? And so we've seen this change of people either going interstate. I know somebody recently who moved to Queensland. They said, look, it's still more affordable to live in Queensland than it is to live in Sydney.
And a lifestyle that comes with it as well.
Yeah, because they said, look, I've got young kids. At least I can go up there and buy a house, whereas here I'm going to struggle to buy a house in Sydney. So there's lots of things that cause the market to ebb and flow. But I'm sure it's your next question you were going to ask me about where you think it's all going. But,
I mean, well, this is the first time that a lot of homeowners are going to see interest rates rise. Like all predictions are at some stage next year we're going to see rates rise. So there's no way to sugarcoat that. So for a lot of homeowners, this is going to be their first rate rise. Yeah, sure, there's been a few fluctuations, for example, but for as long as I've been doing this, I've only ever known rates to come down as well. So this is new. This is going to be, I guess, uncharted territory for a lot of homeowners and home buyers. What are your thoughts when you say, because we say, look, the market is going gangbusters. We're seeing rates come down, for example, and they are still at historic lows. So even if they do go up, they're still at low.
They're still low. Yeah, they're still low. The only difference is that, you know, I suppose people with low interest rates, you're able to borrow a lot more, so your debt's a lot higher. But I've never been a doom booster or a pessimist. I mean, you know, if I was to believe everything I read in the media, you know, you'd spend all day hiding under your desk wearing a helmet waiting for the sky to fall in. And it doesn't happen because if you're going to have a functioning economy, people need to be able to meet their mortgage repayments and go on holidays and buy cars. And first home buyers need to be able to enter the property market. So I think that all that's going to happen is we will get interest rate rises. And as you would know better than me, lenders always factor in interest rate rises.
I mean, they've already buffered someone. They've already stress tested the rate at 6% now anyway. So if rates go up, you shouldn't feel a difference anyway.
Well, that's right, because if you think about how they've been adjusting interest rates, generally 0.25%, right, at most. We're not seeing half or 1 percentage point. So, you know, to get to a point that's gone beyond the bank's stress test, that's going to be a lot of interest rate rises to suddenly say, well, I'm now feeling pain. I can't see that being a real issue if and when rate rises do go up. And I agree with you. I think rates will go up. They have to try and contain inflation, which is a global problem at the moment. And we can't have property prices going up at the levels they are now. It's just crazy. I mean, if you look at the official data, they'll tell you that prices have gone up about 25, 30% in the last year.
Yeah.
Now, that's That's the median or the average. But I've got examples where prices have gone up 50% and 60%.
Can we look at some of these examples? I'm pretty sure they'll blow our minds on some of these. I know you've got this outline here, and this is what I love about kind of your line of work. You get to see some prestige properties. And
there was a property at Bondi Beach that sold in May last year for about 5.375, and they've just sold it for $9 million.
Wow.
And they didn't do anything to it, right? So that's 68% growth. Let's have a look at another one here. There was a property up on the northern beaches at Cromer.
Yep.
It sold 3 years ago for $2.6 million, and they've done nothing to it.
Yeah.
And that just sold just under $5 million.
Oh, really?
So that's gone up 90% in 3 years. Right. Here's another one at Avalon Beach on the northern beaches here in Sydney. They bought it February 19 for $2.835, and they just sold it for $6 million. Right? We're talking about the same property, right? It's basically the same condition. And there's lots of these examples. There was another one in the northwest of Sydney at Glenwood, sold a year ago, September, for $1,065,000. The only thing they did do is they did change the kitchen and put new floor tiles in. But this was like a project-style home.
Yeah.
So $1,065,000, and a year later they sold it for $1.58. Right. So here's another one, North Bondi, sold in June 19 for $6.3 million. And it was a fairly modern home, and they haven't done anything to it. So June 19, 6.3, and just a little over 2 years later, they sold it for 11.235.
Wow.
That's 78% growth in just over 2 years. So I sit here and I annualise the growth over whether it was a year or 18 months or 2 years, and I'll rattle off some of these very quickly. This is annual growth: 35, 56, 26, 27, 30, 30, 38, 63, 45, 43% in a year. When we talk about prices on average have gone up 25%, there's plenty of properties that have gone up more than 25%.
Yeah.
So,
and it's also the flip side. So there's properties that haven't done as well in comparison, which is a lot of people they're almost frustrated by it, going, well, I'm seeing prices like double in the last couple of years, but my property hasn't done that. And I guess that's another flip side to investing, which a lot of people kind of get in and
it's this thing that I've often said about the importance of buying well.
Yeah.
And you can't just pay whatever. At some point, there'll be a reckoning on you paying too much. I remember looking at a property on the northern beaches where in 2004 they bought it for $10 million in this particular suburb. Yeah. It was an unheard of price. And then they sold it 14 years later after they had it on the market for 18 months for $7 million.
Wow.
So did the market fall during that time by about 30%? No. It was never worth $10 million in the first place. Yeah. So you do have to be careful, and it's a bit sounds like great advice, but in the current climate, it's impossible to stick to it. Yeah. Because the scarcity
as well. There's not enough supply, so people are just going, well, I just need to pay whatever just to get into the market or to take that property off the market as well.
And that's what they're doing at the moment. They're saying, look, I'm going to be here for 10 years, 20 years, whatever. If I have to pay a bit extra now to make sure I get the property rather than miss out and watch the market race away, I'll pay the extra. And that's fine. But if you have to suddenly sell in 12 months because, I don't know, you're not well or something, or you've got to move overseas or in a state, and suddenly you got divorced or whatever, and you suddenly have to sell, that can be a problem.
Absolutely.
But I think the longer this boom goes on for, the closer it must be we're getting to the end of it. But I'm not expecting Armageddon at the end of it. I'm really not. And as much as that makes a great headline, I think all that's going to happen is the market will just flatten out, and we're not going to get 30% growth. you might get 5% growth. And
which is a very normal market then.
That's right. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what we can't keep doing is seeing prices go up at 30 and 40% per annum like we are now. Because unless you're going to match it with wages growth, and I'm not sure you're seeing too many people talking about this massive wage growth that they've had.
In fact, I think they're talking about next year being the Great Resignation. So, in fact, I think we're going to see almost the opposites that, where people might go, hey, look, I'm overworked, maybe a little bit underappreciated, and I want to have the option to take some time off work perhaps as well, which could also mean has its own implications. It's very
interesting, and that's been another thing really as a result of COVID. I mean, I know COVID has been a terrible thing, and it really has, and don't get me wrong, but I think it's also made a lot of people stop and think and reevaluate what matters. Suddenly, there's dad at home all of a sudden playing with the kids, rather than being this invisible person in the background. And so I think that aspect of it has been good. And I agree with you. A lot of people are going to say, why am I still doing this job? I actually hate it. Can't I go and do something else?
Yeah.
Or why am I working this hard? I've enjoyed the lockdown where I've had a bit more time. And I've personally experienced that. Sometimes I think I'm a workaholic, and I've had all this spare time, and I thought, gee, this actually feels quite nice. There's no pressure. There's, it's I've got all these things I can do on the weekend that I can pick and choose from, whereas normally it's all organised, it's all planned, and you're going to be here at 9 o'clock, and then at 11 you're going to be there, and it remains to be seen. I still think there's a bit more steam in the market.
Yeah.
And I think if we do get interest rate rises in the new year, that might just be enough to start spooking people. They go, oh maybe we should wait. Because a lot of it's very psychological.
Oh, I mean, fixed rates went up just recently, and that was enough to kind of put the jitters through people going, I'm like, that's a whole 0.3%. There's nothing to lose sleep over really in the grand scheme of things. But even that just kind of, and the recent APRA changes, people got a little bit scared. So I feel like they're fringe buyers perhaps, or maybe some passive buyers that just go, look, that was enough just to push them out of the market. They were never really in the market. Perhaps they were looking, they weren't pre-approved, they weren't ready to go. Whereas I feel like the serious buyers are going, well, actually, we want a roof over our head. We want some security. We want to raise our kids in a certain pocket or neighbourhood. There's investors that will always be in the market, irrespective of rates, irrespective of price growth. There are good quality investors that want to buy quality properties as well. And there's first home buyers that natural attrition will always want to get into the market as well, isn't it?
Look, and I think, you can't underestimate sentiment as well. This whole thing of FOMO as well.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on, everyone else is buying. What are we doing? We better get in as well. And so there is this thing of sentiment. And I think the fact that, we've come out of the lockdown, everyone's feeling good again. And as bad as it has been, it probably hasn't been as bad as we thought, because a lot of people have said, well, I've still been able to work. I've still been able to pay my bills and do this. I know there's businesses struggling out there, and I get that, and some of them have closed down. But there's also a lot of people that
thrived,
that have just continued on. My son works for one of the major banks, and he just worked from home. Nothing changed for him. My daughter works in education, and they just did everything online, know. So that's not for everyone. And as I said, there have been businesses that have struggled and may not survive. But I think it's a sentiment thing. And it was a bit like when we went back to the GFC.
Yes.
That was going to be the end of the universe, right? But we survived that. So I sit here now and I think, what's going to cause the market to crash? That, everyone they're predicting, is the market going to crash? And surely it has to. But if we can survive the GFC, if we can survive the pandemic, and in a pandemic, not survive, have a property boom.
Yes.
Well, if we're out of that now and we're rebuilding the economy and tourism's going to start cranking up and we're going to get people coming in from overseas again. Because I think that's the other thing that no one really talks about.
Yeah.
What's going to happen once we open up the borders and we start having migration levels start to pick up again. So I'm still optimistic about it. I just think we're not going to go up at 30% per annum year after year. It's just going to pull back, but that's fine. That's not a problem.
I love it. It's a sensible view of the market in my mind. Now, we could keep chatting about the market for hours, I feel, and I feel like we're going to get you back on at some point in the future as well.
Anytime you want.
There's so much knowledge inside your head and the experience as well, and kind of seeing the waves. I guess when I'm talking to our clients, it's buy what you can when you can. So if you feel it's the right time to get into the market, you're probably seeing this, and you're talking about your children now trying to get into the buying, and we've bought at home recently as well. You don't wait for the market to be the right time or the right cycle. You'll never know when that is. You buy the right home that you can afford, and it's the right for you. And
look, I'll give you a recent example of that. A good friend of mine rang up and said, look, my daughter's looking at buying something with her partner. They're first home buyers, but, somebody said to them, you should wait.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what are you going to wait for? You're probably going to find the market will continue to race away from you. And if you found something that you like, you go, well, this is it. This is our dream home.
Yeah.
Why would you wait? Why would you let it go? So my view has been, if you can afford to buy it and you like it and it suits you, buy it. Yeah. This whole idea, the amount of people that have waited for the market to crash over the decades, most of them have come up short. They've found, the market has raced away from us. Occasionally you do get a market correction, and we've had that.
Yeah.
But
even those corrections weren't bloodbaths as they were expecting. They stored, and there was still growth in the market. It wasn't negative. It just slowed down.
That's exactly right. So I just say, if you can afford to buy something, you just get in there and do it, because property tends to be more of a long-term proposition. Yeah. These aren't shares you're buying that you think, I might sell them tomorrow.
Yeah.
You're buying a place to live in, whether as a first home buyer or, you're buying it as a family home or whatever it is, or somewhere to retire. You're not generally moving in a real hurry. That's been my advice to people. But I get it. You pick up newspapers and you wait and see now, Aaron. Once we're going to start talking about rate rises, and we're going to start talking about the crash that's to come. And it always happens. And I always keep those headlines from the media because I love them. Because I then, 6-12 months later, I'm doing my presentations and I go, well, it never happened. Yeah. They told us it would. And I heard at the beginning of the the pandemic, all the predictions came out.
Yes.
10%, 20%, 30%, 40%.
These were bank economists that were coming out and saying
this. I even heard 50%.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, well, we may as well just wait until they just say property will be worthless, and the complete opposite happened. Mm-hmm. So, my job as a valuer is to watch what's going on in the marketplace and report on it. Mm-hmm. I don't sit there to try and dictate it in any way because I can't. So I just keep my ear to the ground and just observe it for what it is. So, and I just say to people, just, be a bit cautious in reading headlines and all that kind of stuff, and get good advice from people in whatever industry you're dealing with, whether you need to talk to a solicitor, a mortgage broker, a real estate agent. Talk to people that know what they're talking about. And be careful of just sitting around the barbecue on a Sunday and, there's always one pessimist in there.
With the loudest voice.
Yeah, and if you listen to them, you'll never do anything. You'll never get out of bed in the morning because you'll go, I think the sky's going to fall in today. So, and we can't live our lives like that.
No, well said. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your time,
pleasure.
Your energy, your info as well. And
happy to do it any time. And you're right. I mean, I've got all this stuff in my head. I think I better get it out of my head and share it with people because, there's no point taking it to the grave with me. So,
absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks very much, Peter. We'll include your details on our bio as well. I hope you found that helpful. That's been another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. I'm Aaron Christie David. If you found this episode helpful, leave us a review and we'll chat soon. Thanks.